Today on Newsgirls. Inside Trump's foreign torture prison, Venezuelan migrants and what's being called a forced disappearance.
And the greeting they got from the prison guards was, "Welcome to hell."
President Trump showed these horrific conditions with a lot of pride.
Sydney Sweeney's racist ad ripping the campaign apart, saying that it promotes eugenics.
Become like a left versus right issue.
The stock jumped as high as, I think, 26%.
And not awful news.
Japan is launching clinical trials for fake blood.
1 to 2 cups of black coffee, 14% lower risk of all-cause mortality.
Welcome back to Newsgirls. I'm Wren.
And I'm Mabel. Let's get into the stories. President Trump paid El Salvador $6 million to house 252 Venezuelan migrants in what's being called a forced disappearance. And they were housed in the country's notorious terrorism confinement center, or CECOT, for 4 months.
Well, they were supposed to be there for the rest of their lives. The Salvadoran government has said the only way to get out of it is inside a coffin.
And the migrants, most of whom did not have any criminal history, were released last week and then sent back to Venezuela as a part of a prisoner trade with the U.S. And so now the first details of these psychological, physical, and even sexual abuses of what these migrants went through at CECOT are finally coming out, and it's truly inhumane.
Yeah, literally started the second they arrived. They were cut off from the outside world and could have no contact with their families or even legal representation.
Like, some of their families had no idea where they had gone for months. So one migrant who was a barber in Texas said that his alien identification number just disappeared from the site, and that's what's used to track detainees in the U.S. immigration system, so nobody could find where he was.
And the greeting they got from the prison guards was, "Welcome to hell, where you will live out the rest of your lives and be condemned." And then they were forced to kneel on the ground as officers shaved their heads and confiscated all of their belongings, including their jewelry and their money. And then this group of the Venezuelans were taken to a wing called Module 8, which means they were completely isolated from everybody else in the prison.
They were then taken to cells that contained up to 80 men. So just imagine they were all cramped there together, sleeping on metal bunk beds without any mattresses. And one prisoner said that he slept in a seated position for 4 months.
And they were served the same meatless meals every day, which they said they just weren't given enough food. And they were only allowed to shower once a day at 4 a.m. And there were no walls to separate the bathing areas from the toilet or the rest of the cell. So there was no privacy. Like, everything was visible to everyone.
And then, of course, what's flagging human rights violations and outrage all around the world are the reports of brutal physical torture that took place. So the prisoners would be beaten for talking, complaining about conditions. A 22-year-old prisoner said that he was hit so hard that he lost half a molar and then wasn't given any painkillers for a month. And then for more severe beatings, prisoners were sent to a punishment cell called La Isla, or the Island, which is a dark room with no water or ventilation.
And from their accounts, it sounds like beatings were just regular occurrences. There's a haunting quote: "We got a beating for breakfast, we got a beating for lunch, and we got a beating for dinner." But then it sounds like they ramped up if they were being punished. Like, there was an incident of several inmates trying to break out of their cell, and they said they were punished with 6 days of intense beatings, including being punched, kicked, and struck by clubs. And then on the last day, the male guards brought in the female guards to strike them while they were naked, as the male guards recorded on their phones and laughed. And no wonder they weren't given medical attention, because apparently the prison nurse was watching this horrific beating and shouted, "Hit the piñata." Some inmates vomited blood, others fractured bones, and others said they couldn't walk for days.
I mean, that's literally insane, and things clearly just got so bad. The inmates were like desperate for something to change, so a lot of them partook in hunger strikes, and this was crazy, even blood strikes, so that the beatings would stop. So first-hand accounts said that some inmates removed clamps from the cell's piping or corners of their metal bunks to cut themselves, and then they smeared blood on the walls and wrote the letters SOS and "We are not terrorists, we are migrants."
And they said the blood strike worked because 3 or 4 days after the strike started, 2 prison directors came in to negotiate that they would stop the beatings if the inmates would stop the strike. But then a few inmates refused to have their cells inspected, so the guards started beating them again and even shot them with pellets.
And it's important to remember that while all of this is going on, none of the prisoners were actually given trials. So Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act in March. We're sure you all remember talking about whether that was legal or not. And basically, it gave the government the right to pick these people up from their homes or parking lots and without due process convict them of belonging to the criminal gang Tren de Aragua. But investigations showed that less than 10% of the prisoners had criminal past and were sent to CECOT simply for having tattoos that resembled those gang tattoos. There was no other proof for them to be sent there.
It seems so unjust to even just detain people over such little evidence, much less send them to this foreign torture prison. So CECOT is considered the crown jewel of El Salvador's aggressive anti-crime strategy. It's a maximum security mega prison. It was built 2 years ago specifically to house gang members. And you might recognize the name CECOT because that was where the wrongfully deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia was sent, and we all followed that whole saga. And no one knows exactly how many inmates are being held in CECOT because the Salvadoran government doesn't release that information, but it does have the capacity to hold up to 40,000.
I mean, it is a crazy place. Apparently 400 prisoners had already died since CECOT opened less than 2 years ago. But other than that, there's very little known about it. Apparently all of the media tours there are staged by the president. So what goes on there is like very under wraps. There are reports of even prison guards putting like mattresses on bunks or giving prisoners extra food when there are visitors there, or like photos being taken so that the prison has a really good reputation before it's all taken away again. So these recent accounts detailing all of the conditions are really important.
Well, one account that's getting a lot of attention right now, and understandably so, is Andre Hernandez Romero, who's a 32-year-old gay makeup artist. He's from Venezuela, but he was living in the U.S. under asylum. He wasn't given a trial, and he doesn't have a criminal record. And like the others, the only justification for him being sent to CECOT is because his tattoos kind of look like or similar to gang tattoos. And he alleges he was forced to perform oral sex on at least one of the prison guards. His quote is, "I was sexually abused by the same Salvadoran authorities who guarded us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week." And that really paints a picture of how violating this is. Like, you're being protected and watched at all times by your abusers.
And so now, after this prison swap, Venezuela, rightfully so, is opening a formal investigation into several Salvadoran officials, including the president. So far, the Salvadoran government hasn't publicly addressed the torture allegations. All they said is that this exchange was a diplomatic victory.
Well, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security hasn't commented on these disturbing new allegations, but they have doubled down on their claims that these men are gang members without providing evidence like usual. DHS Assistant Secretary Trish McLaughlin said, "Once again, the media is falling all over themselves to defend criminal illegal gang members."
And then Marco Rubio in a statement said, "Every wrongfully detained American in Venezuela is now free and back in our homeland." So clearly being wrongfully detained matters in some cases. Also, interestingly, we found out that one of the 10 Americans in this prison swap is a legit murderer. So he killed 3 people in Spain and is now free to roam in the US. So
awesome. Well, the Human Rights Watch said it's like Guantanamo on steroids. These people are outside the U.S. in a country with no separation of powers. They're in a space essentially ungoverned by law. So we are talking to the director of the Americas Division of Human Rights Watch, Juanita Gobertas Estrada, to learn more about the legal humanitarian violations that have been potentially committed by the Trump administration by sending these migrants to CECOT.
can you help us understand what makes CECOT so dangerous and so different from other prisons?
The Salvadoran prison system that we have researched for more than 3 years has been characterized by incommunicado detention, ill treatment, lack of access to adequate medical supplies, lack of access to adequate food. CECOT has been used by President Bukele as his propaganda strategy, and now by President Trump himself and his government to try to show these horrific conditions with a lot of pride, to be able, supposedly, to deter supposed alleged criminals in El Salvador and deter, in the case of the U.S., migrants.
Have you at the Human Rights Watch discovered anything about the conditions or practices that just has stunned you?
So we're starting to interview some of the people that have been released and that are now in Venezuela. What we're starting to hear is really, really worrisome. No access to drinkable water. People describing that you could even see not only the color, but even sometimes worms in water that was supposed to be the ones that they would drink under very severe heat in the cells. Punishment cells in which people that supposedly misbehaved were taken and where others could hear their screaming while they were being beaten. We're in the process of corroborating all of this information.
We're glad that you mentioned corroborating the story, because a lot of people have been mentioning that no outlet or human rights group has been able to verify the claims of abuse yet. Does do these accounts sound consistent with what you're confirming?
They do, because the government has declared for now 3 years a state of emergency, suspending due process and basic guarantees that have led the Bukele administration to detain more than 86,000 people, including 3,300 children. We are making the connections between what we're collecting now in the case of CECOT and a lot of the patterns that we have seen in the Salvadoran prison system throughout these years.
And connecting that to the US government, most of these migrants didn't have a criminal history and they weren't even given a trial before they were sent to CECOT. And I think a lot of us are asking, how is this even possible?
To lay the ground of what the US government has as an obligation. Of course, there's no human right to open borders, but there's a very clear obligations that the US government does have, and that in these cases have been very clearly violated. People have a right, an asylum claim, if they believe that they have been persecuted. These were people that had been politically persecuted by the Maduro regime in Venezuela that were fleeing that persecution. And they never had a chance by the US government to present that asylum. And then the second obligation is that the US government cannot send people back to a place where they can be tortured.
We know Trump is kind of using this Alien Enemies Act, which is, as we understand, this was not the purpose of its creation. So do you think he's using this improperly to like deport these migrants?
Certainly a misuse. This is a law that was designed in principle for a state of war, which is certainly not the case in the US. So interpreting the Foreign Aliens Act without understanding that the US does have these obligations regarding migrants that are fleeing persecution, that could fear torture, it goes against its own international obligations.
And we've seen recent reports of the Trump administration sending migrants to countries like South Sudan. So what do you think this practice of sending migrants that might even be criminals to third countries?
So the whole idea of a safe third country originally was the idea that if the US wants other country to actually evaluate if that person has a real asylum claim, it can send people to a safe third country. For example, a safe third country was considered Canada, which makes sense. What happens in these cases is that these are not safe countries. They were detained and kept incommunicado, in full detention, without any possibility of filing an asylum claim.
Why do you think the Trump administration is sending them to these third countries in detention centers instead of building more in the US and sending them to Alligator Alcatraz?
The propaganda operation of sending people, Venezuelan migrants, to CECOT, the way it was televised, the way ill treatment was exposed. It was not covered. The idea was for it to be known, displayed. And for me personally, it's very clear that terrorizing migrants is a strategy by the Trump administration to assure that people don't migrate.
That's a really important element, and it's something I think so many people forget. But there's other people who say that's where they belong and that they're criminals and they're terrorists. So what would you say to people saying this is what they deserve?
We've spoken with a lot of migrants because of our field work. Are really people trying to build a new life. These are people that have been harassed by organized crime in Ecuador and told them that either they flee from their homes and pay the extortion, or their whole family is going to be killed. These are people, women that have faced repeated gang rape in Haiti, trying to protect their young girls from experiencing exactly the same. That's the majority of migrants that have attempted to go through a terrible journey. It reminds them of the same kind of violence that they have experienced back home, with the small window of hope that they could actually reach a country in which they could build a new life.
Well, unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably seen the discourse about Sydney Sweeney's new American Eagle jeans ad all over your feed.
Genes are passed down from parents to offspring, often determining traits like hair color, personality, and even eye color. My genes are blue.
Sydney Sweeney has very genes.
American Eagle also put out physical ads that say Sydney Sweeney has great genes with a G, but then that genes is crossed out and written as like jeans with a J. So at first glance, this all seems pretty innocuous. It's just another hot celebrity like promoting jeans. But the internet has started ripping the campaign apart, saying that it's racist and promotes eugenics since it's suggesting the superiority of blonde-haired, blue-eyed genetics.
My jeans are blue is crazy work. Once again, it's the double entendre of blue jeans, meaning like the physical denim, and her blue eyes. Sydney Sweeney's blonde-haired, blue-eyed, thin, voluptuous, and all the right places body is being presented as a lineage of genes worthy of reproduction. And it positions her within this larger trend of white femininity being used to justify regressive politics. Even if you want to say it's a reach, it's not. This language has cultural context. No, I really don't think this is an accident. We're seeing a rise of anti-woke consumer branding. This campaign was engineered to resonate with a very specific audience. Conservative coded branding is selling right now. And even American Eagle, which was kind of like one of the big brands in the body positivity movement, it's not selling anymore. Done. It's about market alignment, and unfortunately, their stock soared really after this launch. And I know you might be tempted to say it's not that deep, but this is how ideology spreads.
Please keep in mind the current political landscape of the United States, where the presidential administration is trying to return back to a time where America wasn't diverse, and that those that are reproducing are what eugenics would consider fit for reproduction to improve society.
This feels like as loud a dog whistle as we've had in retail marketing recently, and it just feels important to call out the Make Eugenics Sexy Again campaign strategy behind all of this.
But then in response to all the backlash, American Eagle supporters are saying liberals are blowing things out of proportion, and they're actually cheering Sydney Sweeney on for ending woke advertising. So it has become like a left versus right issue. And today we just really wanted to get to the bottom of why this has the internet so riled up on both sides.
Yeah, so let's first investigate Sydney Sweeney and what she kind of stands for in culture right now. So she obviously played Cassie in the very hit show Euphoria and kind of just rose to the highest ranks of fame. Like, she was at the Bezos wedding last month. She recently got a $1 billion lingerie deal that was backed by Bezos. She's in the running to be the next Bond girl. And of course, she is known for being a sex symbol more than anything. And even though it's clear she's stayed away from politics, this isn't the first time that she's been in political controversy.
Yeah, a few years ago, she posted photos from her mom's 60th birthday where she's standing next to a relative who is wearing a Blue Lives Matter shirt. It's like the thin blue line pro-police shirt. And then other family members at that party were wearing red hats that look exactly like MAGA hats that say "Make 60 Great Again."
So she clapped back at all the haters saying, "You guys, this is wild. An innocent celebration for my mom's milestone 60th birthday has turned into an absurd political statement which was not the intention. Please stop making assumptions. Much love to everyone and happy birthday, Mom."
I'm from a town called Spokane, right on the border of Washington and Idaho. I feel a bond to both states. Like when people ask, "Where are you from?" I say Washington. But when people ask, "Did you go to a Trump-themed party for your mom?" I say Idaho.
And then fans were super pissed, saying, "Assumptions, don't gaslight your fans. Many are likely young progressive people based on the content of the show that gave you fame. Your family is obviously far right." And so this became like a whole thing. And then Sydney said in interviews that she thought the MAGA style hats would be funny. So clearly she didn't get the outrage.
Well, bringing it back to the ad, people have also sleuthed out that the CEO of American Eagle is a Trump Vance supporter and a longtime Republican donor. So it's like a further proof of this, like, this messaging was purposeful or something. But we do want to point out something that's interesting about this campaign is that all of the profits of the jeans are going to benefit Crisis Text Line, which is a nonprofit that offers mental health support to domestic violence survivors.
And I mean, that's great, but it just doesn't take away from the fact that this campaign is so out of touch with the current political climate. It kind of reminds me of that like Kendall Jenner Pepsi campaign that came out in like 2017, where she's like at this very racially charged protest giving everyone Pepsi to diffuse the tension. And everyone was so pissed that Pepsi actually withdrew the ad within 48 hours. But right now with all of this, we're not seeing American Eagle put out any statements or obviously withdraw the ad. So that says a lot about, I don't know, who this target audience for this ad is, because it doesn't seem like they regret it.
Sydney has kind of a history of choosing controversial products and projects. You might remember really recently she was selling soap with Dr. Squatch that was literally called Sydney Sweeney's bathwater. Allegedly, they were saying it literally contains some of her bathwater in the bar of soap. It was like a limited edition thing. So maybe she thinks this is the way to like make a splash and like keep this level of fame.
And then Wren sent me something really funny this morning. American Eagle is clearly not doing well.
Yeah, I don't know if this is related to the ad or not, but I got a LinkedIn notification that they're looking for a social media manager. So
maybe someone quit. So to learn more about what is going on, we spoke to Jared Jenkins, a brand strategist and content creator who's done some deep digging behind American Eagle's strategic decisions, why they chose Sydney Sweeney as the messenger, and all of the outrage.
So Jared, just to kind of set the scene, why is this ad so problematic?
So I think it's most problematic because it kind of sets up the idea that there is such thing as good genes. In this context of this particular ad, they're saying blonde hair, blue eye. That's the aesthetic that they're trying to sell here. You'll never hear in an ad campaign good genes as being, darker skin or having, brown eyes or whatever else.
The point of advertisements are obviously to reach a target demographic. And it was interesting to us because American Eagle is usually targeted towards like younger adults, even teens. Who do you think this ad is really targeted to?
So I think very solidly that this ad is targeting the same demographic that Dr. Squatch was targeting with the soap. So I think it's the exact same market. The constantly online internet male, younger in demographic. I saw one comment on my channel that said, Sydney Sweeney is basically at this point like an OnlyFans model who's not on OnlyFans, and like I kind of got what they were saying there.
And how about the political climate? Is this part of like a big shift in brands trying to send more conservative messaging?
I think so. I did see that the CEO of American Eagle is a big Trump supporter. I do think there's a relationship there, knowing that in this particular environment, there is kind of something to be said for having an anti-woke stance or on things or whatever else, especially given that in previous years, they were talking about body inclusivity and all these other messages. And now it seems like they've done a complete pivot from that.
Something I think all of us are imagining is like, what was going on in these brainstorming rooms when they were coming up with this ad? Why do you think American Eagle decided this is the messaging we should go with?
I mean, I just think that increasingly we're seeing, Wren, that it's working. My guess is that the team that kind of signed off on this, and let's be very clear, it was signed off. This wasn't, it wasn't like a people read into it and said GENES. That was literally in the campaign. Their stock was down 45% in the past year, right? They've been just getting absolutely just demolished. After this most recent campaign with Sydney Sweeney, which the stock jumped as high as, I think, 26%, settling down around 20%. I think it was a calculated risk, and it happened exactly, I think, how they wanted it to. And so, people were commenting and celebrating on the CMO, Craig Brummer's LinkedIn was like, yo, dude, you did it. You just created $300 million overnight on one campaign. That is unheard of.
You said that calling out American Eagle and like all of this controversy doesn't even matter at this point because they've already won. And you said that other companies will start doing the same. What do you mean by that? Like, is this a new trend in provocative ads that you think we'll start seeing?
I think so. I mean, American Eagle has never positioned itself as a company that was really about diversity or whatever else. It's always been historically kind of like, generally a white suburban brand. As far as other brands go, my former company, I used to work at Meta, they did the anti-DEI thing and their stock just hit an all-time high. And there's no shortage of companies like that. So I don't think that there will be repercussions for what American Eagle did.
You did also in your video mention how part of the advertising strategy targeting these like chronically online people is to make it feel like you really know Sydney Sweeney, which is why there's this 20-story 3D billboard in Times Square. There's like the ad on the Vegas Sphere. You said like American Eagle is dedicating a broadcast channel, so it feels like you're talking to Sydney Sweeney. Do you think it's smart to have an advertising strategy? It seems like who these ads are targeting are not the people that are buying the jeans.
I mean, it's a good question. And I think we're still trying to figure out this new economy. I mean, I just saw someone post the Times Square ad because it's up now. It's a large three-dimensional activation. She's laying in a bed. She's kind of waving at passerbys. It's very flirty. I'm guessing the Sphere is going to be something similar. But Craig Brummer said that they were going to have a dedicated channel on Instagram and Be Real, which I didn't know Be Real was still a thing after 2 years ago, but apparently they're still hanging in there and they're a major part of this campaign. And I'm guessing it's because of target demographic, but a dedicated channel for kind of like you're engaging with them and, it's feel intimate, just like bathwater. And as far as the disconnect, I don't know. So the interesting thing is that in addition to the stock going up, the Sydney jeans sold out. So like someone's actually buying it. I don't know who. I don't know if it could be kind of like the bathwater boys.
What do you say to the people who accuse you and other creators who are talking about this and breaking down how this is offensive to so many people by saying that the analysis of this ad is kind of being blown out of proportion? It's just ad wordplay, it's a joke.
The argument that they're trying to make is that it wasn't intentional. But like I think that even if it wasn't intentional, it's hard to argue that it wasn't reckless. We didn't intend to hurt anybody with this campaign or whatever else. But we're going to put this thing out there, putting, people with blonde hair, blue eyed on this pedestal in this way. We are going to, clearly talk about, genes and, and we're going to clearly talk about these things in a manner that's like a wink and a nod to certain communities. I don't know if you've seen the videos about people posting, like showing the actual decision makers in the room, the CEO, the CMO, whatever. Basically, a group of 10 white people made this decision, no people of color. It is effectively reckless to not seek, even if you don't have anyone in your leadership, to seek some kind of outside advice for this type of campaign. That's just common business practice. And I'm guessing they did not do that because I don't think they cared about the outcome. They knew that it was going to be provocative. They rolled the dice, and I think they won.
At the least, it's tone deaf. And at the most, like I just keep coming back to, even if it was just like harmless wordplay and they're like playing on having good genes, that original phrase comes from eugenics. They might not have thought it's going to be as serious as it's being taken, but you knew it was going to, no matter what, harken back to eugenics, and you're purposely making a joke about that.
No, 1000%. And it's just like, it's really sad because, we've made so much progress as a society. No, I don't think we're heading down Handmaid's Tale, but I do think that this is aligned with the erosion of a lot of the rights that we worked really hard for. I'll just say that much.
So the first two stories were kind of intense.
Just prison torture and Nazi eugenics.
Just the Newsgirls usual. So we thought we'd end the episode with something a little lighter. Everyone's favorite, not awful news.
What were you doing?
I was saying not awful news.
So in case you don't know, Mabel and I host a weekly segment for the Good News Network. Comes out every Monday. We do 5 good news stories to get your week started right. So these are a selection of our favorite ones from the past couple months. So this first one we have not stopped thinking about since we first saw it. Japan is launching clinical trials for artificial red blood cells, so fake blood, and that it'll be aimed at addressing the critical blood shortage.
Yeah, so these synthetic red blood cells can be stored at room temperature for up to 2 years. So unlike traditional blood, which has to be refrigerated and has a pretty short shelf life of less than a month.
And like every detail makes the story crazier. The fake blood would be universal, so there'd be no matching blood types, and it would be so perfect for an emergency situation. You might not know someone's blood type.
So Japan recently tested the synthetic blood on 16 healthy adult volunteers and gave them 100 to 400 milliliter doses. And the trial would just basically continue to expand. And the hope is for Japan to have universal synthetic blood by 2030. So that's like 5 years.
And the fake blood was developed with expired donor blood. So it's so cool that it just didn't go to waste.
No, it's true. And it looks like the US, I guess, is testing this too, but on animals. So they're freeze drying the blood in powdered form and then testing them on bunnies before the human trial starts. And the Defense Department, interestingly, is spending more than $58 million to fund this.
I seriously love this story. I can't believe any of this is possible. It's so cool.
So a breakthrough discovery shows that plants might actually be talking and that insects can understand them. So a new study from Tel Aviv University found that tomato plants under stress, like dehydration, emit ultrasonic sounds, kind of like popcorn popping. And even though humans can't hear it because the pitch is so high, moths can hear and like understand them.
So in lab trials, female moths were given the choice between 2 tomato plants. They both looked and smelled the same, but one was screaming with stress sounds and one was silent. And the moths clearly preferred the quiet plant to lay their eggs.
And this is the first scientific proof that an insect responds to sound signals from a plant, although there have been other studies, which are also really cool, that have shown that plants can hear the sounds of like pollinators that are nearby and then rapidly increase the sugar concentration in their nectar to attract certain insects.
And it's actually more than just moths that can hear these sounds. So previously, scientists deduced that plants emit up to 30 to 50 of these pops when they're stressed per hour. Healthy plants, though, are almost silent with less than 1 per hour. But creatures like bats, mice, and insects all have the ability to hear this frequency.
And the researchers are calling this field plant acoustics, and they believe that the discovery is just the beginning of obviously so many possibilities. Like, imagine farmers using sensors to listen to crop stress and then like water them where they need.
Next, a topic we talk about surprisingly frequently on this show compared to what you think we would, which is pirate ships. So after 250 years, Australia says they've finally located Captain Cook's legendary ship, the HMS Endeavour, and it's off the coast of Rhode Island.
Yeah, so this ship sank in 1778, so that's during the American Revolution. And after 25 years of like this detective work, they've confirmed that this is the ship.
Well, the Australians are sure this is the ship. Apparently, some U.S. researchers are unsure. They're not convinced yet.
But the Australians are citing like how the timbers and mast positions match Cook's original 1768 plans down to the millimeter. So I'm convinced. But this is pretty exciting because I know my brother did an elementary school project on Captain Cook. That's like why I know of him. So that's cool.
Oh, that's cool. I've always wondered if Captain Cook inspired Captain Hook.
Oh.
I'll ask your brother the next time I see him. And for some background, those of us who didn't do projects on Captain Cook, he was a British explorer who mapped huge parts of the Pacific. He's basically credited with helping to redraw the map of the world.
And I guess now only 15% of the ship is left because it's being slowly eaten by shipworms, like gross. So conservation teams are racing now to protect what they can.
Now to one of our favorite topics, which is coffee. Because we now know that black coffee, as in no cream, no sugar, is officially linked to a lower risk of death from all causes.
All causes is crazy. So a new study tracked 46,000 US adults for nearly a decade and found that adults that basically drank 1 to 2 cups of caffeinated black coffee had a 14% lower risk of all-cause mortality, including dying from heart disease. And adults who drank 2 to 3 cups per day saw the link rise to 17%. So like the more coffee you drink, the less likely you're going to like die.
But if you add sugar or cream or normal things, then it just wipes out all of the benefit. Like it literally, they found 0 added benefit to drinking it. But personally, I would rather just not drink it if it's going to be black.
No, black coffee is so gross, but apparently that is the only way that this works. 1 to 3 cups a day, black or lightly sweetened.
So this is great news for people who don't have taste buds.
So a breakthrough in plastic innovation is making waves in Japan. LOL, this like punny. Scientists have developed a non-toxic plastic that dissolves in seawater within 2 to 3 hours.
Yes, and when it breaks down, it doesn't leave any harmful microplastics because it's non-toxic, non-flammable, and it doesn't emit CO2. So that's really great too.
Yeah, so it basically breaks apart into nutritious compounds for ocean-borne bacteria, and the plastic itself is supposed to be as strong and as flexible as normal plastic, but this material is very vulnerable to salt. So when it's immersed in salty ocean water, the plastic literally just dissolves.
It's really cool that not only will this reduce pollution and the effect of pollution on marine life, but they made it so it actually is beneficial and it feeds ocean life.
Have you ever wondered why some parts of your body are more ticklish than others?
Or why can't you tickle yourself?
Well, scientists are trying to figure out this very important question by opening a tickle lab at a university in the Netherlands to study tickling.
Yes, it's the first lab ever of its kind, and it's aiming to standardize tickling experiments so that we can better understand what is going on in our brain when we're being tickled.
Yeah, so the researchers make participants sit in a chair with a plate that has 2 holes in it, and a mechanical stick will literally tickle their toes so that like everyone is being tickled by the same thing. And while this is happening, the neuroscientists monitor their brain activity, heart rate, and like other reactions.
I actually have such ticklish feet that getting pedicures is really painful. I almost said it's torture. But
Yeah, pedicures can be so embarrassing because of that. Like, I remember I was like very ticklish as a child, but I've slightly grown out of it. So maybe adults are less ticklish than kids. Maybe the lab will figure out why.
Well, thank you for tuning into another episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Join us next week to learn about reborn dolls, which are dolls that look like real babies.
Bye.